Thanks everyone for joining us today for our webinar, Wursta in the Cloud, the easy way to secure your org. Surprise, it's Google Cloud. My name is Emily Troffels. I'm the Senior Marketing Communications Manager here at Wursta, and joining me today is Patrick Della Peruta, Wursta's Practice Lead for Digital Workplace, and Pete Hoff, VP of Cybersecurity at Wursta. This meeting is being recorded and all registrants will receive a link to view it later. We ask that you stay on mute because we do have a good amount of people here today. You can submit questions anytime using the Meet chat and we'll answer them at the end. We will also be doing a couple polls, so you'll see that in the right-hand corner, those little shapes or the activities icon. That's where you'll be able to access those polls. And also, I just want to make sure, does everyone have their coffee gift card? If you didn't receive a gift card, please email emily@wursta.com, excuse me, or you can drop your email in the chat and we'll make sure that you get that gift card. We want to make sure everyone is caffeinated and ready to go for today's session. Also, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. I'll drop the speakers' LinkedIn in the chat if you'd like to connect. And if we want to keep going here, I want to just have a quick note and say this event is being hosted by Wursta. A little about us. Our mission is to help organizations maximize their use of the cloud. We work side by side to help clients make good technology decisions and grow their businesses in ways that they wouldn't have the ability to do otherwise. This helps organizations develop cultures of continuous innovation powered by real-time collaboration. And with all that collaboration, however, organizations do have a lot to worry about in terms of security. So with that, I will turn it over to Pete.
Thanks, Emily. I think we'll take advantage real quick of the poll if we can. I'd like to know how many people here have worked remote or currently work remote. I think it's one of those things that's becoming more popular, and we get some feedback here. If everybody could hop on the right-hand side of their screen, I think that little triangle, click on that and place your vote.
Wow, everyone so far is working remote. Do we have anyone here who's at the office? This is impressive.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
well, it really supports some of the data here. So I've got some stats out here. I think this is really interesting, and it's a driver for business. Remote working is so much more flexible for the workforce. For a lot of people, obviously, maybe not those that can't in the service industries. I feel bad for them because I love working remote. But we've seen a huge jump from 4% to 20% of the workforce working remote from home. These are pre-COVID versus COVID numbers, and it's a stat that kind of astounded me. When you think about all of the people working remote, including those that might be in the service industry, if you subtract those out, this is a pretty big number. 55% of the companies out there worldwide are providing the capability to work remote. And for good reason. Businesses actually save money. Estimates right now are around $11,000 annually, and it makes sense. This brings a lot of risk, though, and the risk kind of shifts. It doesn't change how we secure our environments as a Google organization, but it does provide opportunities to improve your security and really understand what's available to you. We see risks today kind of growing, and those are around ransomware. But if you look at the actual infrastructure, your endpoints, meaning your laptops and your desktops and mobile devices, those endpoints need to be managed. Protect you from malware, protect you from files leaving the organization, data loss prevention. Home network security is obviously a big deal. You know, whether or not people have firewalls at home. Most people do, but they might not be configured properly. And patching those systems, kids getting on the systems, etc. It's a big challenge. So we're going to focus a little bit today on both Google Cloud, what people effectively call the GCP environment and how we secure things in the cloud. And also Workspace, which is, most of the people here probably have Workspace. I see a couple familiar faces. But Workspace has a lot of capability to secure even the endpoints, and people are surprised when you get into that conversation. So I'm going to cover topics around Beyond Corp and identity and access management, and also endpoint protection on the GCP side of the house. I'm going to hand it over to Patrick and let him talk a little bit about Workspace and how identity and access management and endpoint security is controlled there. Patrick?
Thank you very much, Pete. And for anybody that's joined any of our sessions in the past, we've done a couple of sessions on Workspace, MDM, and DLP, and some of this will recover that. But for anybody that may have missed those webinars, I think Emily's going to post a link to our YouTube channel. Feel free to check those out. We do highly recommend that. And if you were with those sessions, you remember we had some fun with things like Project DeVito and Danny DeVito and things like that, and demoing and demonstrating some of the capabilities that Google has when it comes to data loss prevention and how we're able to create keyword policies to really drive some policies in terms of how drive files get shared, things like that. So we'll cover a little bit about that, but if you want to check out a more in-depth session on that, you can follow that link that was just posted. I've been a Google Workspace, Google Apps, G Suite admin for more than a decade now, and security over the last couple of years has improved 100 times within the Google Workspace world, and really, when working with organizations and administrators, we really try to boil it down to three focus areas, being controlling devices, controlling your data, and then controlling access. Google is really threading all of this together so that you can incorporate a policy in one area that really has an overlap in some of these other areas. We'll talk a little bit about that here. So controlling devices for organizations that are thinking about Workspace, or organizations that may be on Workspace and using a third party for MDM, or not don't have any MDM strategy to date. Google has all of this out of the box natively within Google Workspace. So as a Workspace customer, you get access to at the very minimum basic MDM management, which allows for administrators to control aspects of your mobile fleet, so iOS and Android, being able to enforce things like passcodes, or having the ability to wipe corporate data from those endpoints. And that could be either on in a BYO model where you're allowing your users to use personal devices, or in a company-owned model where you're buying the fleet of devices and distributing them. Google offers just a wider range of features in terms of MDM. We talked a little bit about basic. They also offer that advanced track for organizations looking to really fine tune what their policies are. So, allowing or preventing things like Siri, or face unlock is another one that we see organizations wanting to incorporate, right? So they want to allow the use of the device, they want to secure it, but they don't necessarily like maybe some of those biometric unlock mechanisms like face unlock, all available within your Google Workspace MDM capabilities. More recently, Google has added the ability to manage Windows 10 endpoint devices, and this was great to see, and something that we've already started to incorporate not only here at Wursta, but working with other organizations as well. So endpoint management, Windows 10 endpoint management, will allow you now to, from an administrator standpoint, to control data on Windows 10 devices. So not only being able to wipe corporate data off of those connected devices, but really able to enforce policies. So think of things like an SCCM or a LAN desk. We're able to push policies and things like that. You are able to do that now through Google's native MDM or Windows Endpoint Management. So if you wanted to push a set of GPO policies, but you're not set up in your organization to support an Active Directory or a GPO in legacy terms. A lot of those GPO settings can now be managed through Google's Windows 10 endpoint management. So things like, I want to push a set of printers to my users, things like that, all capabilities that you have through Windows 10 endpoint management. Moving on to the next bucket, controlling data. This is where the DLP and DeVito thing sort of comes in. Controlling data, super important from an organization standpoint or administrator standpoint in terms of Google Workspace. There is so much data that flies through Google Workspace, whether it's Gmail or Drive, Google Chat, etc. And relying on your users to always follow best practice to safeguard that data is probably not the best method. The users will make mistakes, administrators will make mistakes. So having guardrails in place for that, sorry, Pete, super important.
Yeah, actually, that's a really great point. I know you've got the bullet point up here, but there's a difference between enforcement and hope. You hope your users don't lose their data. You hope that they don't give away their password. So it's one of those things. Enforcement through intelligence and through services is a much better way to go. And I think Google's found a great balance for this. The context-aware access is actually one of those things that's just amazing to me. I think this is one of the greatest advancements because it allows you to enforce a policy based upon context behaviors. Things like what machine they're coming from and what location they're coming from. Did their ISP change?
Right.
I've had security incidents where you had somebody from Texas logging in now from Nigeria, and that's a problem.
Yep.
Obviously, you want to be aware, and then enforcing policies based upon these triggers. Context aware gives you a lot of that flexibility, but to be safe at 2 a.m. so you're not waiting for that phone call, that somebody's account is now hacked and you've got ransomware.
That's exactly right, and I have that called out here as a bullet point. That's that CAA acronym that you see here, or context-aware access, as Pete referred to. Another new feature set, relatively new feature set of the workspace stack, and context-aware access combined with your data loss prevention rules that we've covered in the past, and can go into more at the end here. Again, really now driving a granular policy to your workspace users. So in Pete's example, Pete is normally logs in from Florida or wherever. As Google starts to learn this behavior, or as we put policies in behind this behavior, and Pete now logs in from California, it's going to block access by default. It's going to trigger alerts to administrators. It's going to prevent access to workspace services until that flag is either satisfied or remediated in some cases. So context-aware access continues to grow and evolve, and the controls there are really something that organizations should start to look at in terms of controlling that data.
One other item there, Patrick, and this is really important. It comes with Workspace.
Correct.
It comes with GCP. So you're not paying an extra licensing fee. And I'm going to challenge people to go out there and take a look at what they're paying for the same type of services at other organizations.
Right.
Google includes it because it's an important security feature. And they've done that across the board with a ton of things here.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Moving on to controlling access, and I think this sort of ties all of that together, Pete, and we'll get into a couple of other areas in terms of that access. But controlling access, another sort of important facet of being an administrator for Workspace or just an IT leader in general. Of course, Google offers, from an identity perspective, native multi-factor authentication, or UFA. I think I saw it recently referred to as so native two-factor. If your organization's not currently behind a two-factor system, that would be step one, in my opinion. Like, get your users secure behind some 2FA system. Google has that natively, so sort of step one there. Prerequisite, I think, for a lot of this stuff. More importantly, and one of the areas that I focus on when I work with organizations is OAuth control. This is something that's evolved quite a bit over the last number of years, and was a pain point early on in my days of being a Google Apps at the time administrator. And we'll think of, let me actually, I think I have a slide on this here. So what is OAuth? And OAuth, high level, open standard authorization protocol, right? So it allows for web services and applications to leverage an identity from another system to create an identity in that specific system. Think of it as, or in the example here with Pinterest, it's that continue with Google or log in with Google button that you see on various web services and applications. What this will do, if I had clicked on this button on this Pinterest screenshot, what it'll do is it'll create an account in Pinterest based on my Wursta email address. So I now have a Pinterest account, but it's really tied to, Wursta.com. And what some of these, or a lot of these web services and applications do, is during that grant, during that authorization where you tell Pinterest, yes, you can use my Google account, is that often leads to Pinterest getting access to some amount of data within your Google account. For a personal Gmail user, that may be fine. For a corporate organization, or for any organization, allowing these third-party companies and applications to access what could be your entire Drive data, all of your Gmail data, all of your contact data, I find frightening. And Google has finally added some controls here to help alleviate some of that stress in my life, at least.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me just interject too, Patrick. I'll give you a break from speaking. There's another great point here too. Google focused on trying to make it simple for developers to use the APIs that Google provides. Authentication is kind of a pain. They secure that mechanism. But there's other aspects that are also available, both on Workspace and GCP, SAML integration. So if you wanted to integrate an application for single sign-on, that's another way to do this. It doesn't allow the user to really select their account that they're going to use. So it's a little different. But SAML integration is a nice way to smoothly integrate single sign-on with other applications. And there's over 200 applications out there that are already natively supported by Google. So
Right.
Just another piece. I throw that in there as
it's a great piece, and I think in terms of the 200 out of the box native integrations, it's a great call out. A lot of interest from organizations over the last since the world changed in March of 2020, adopting single sign-on. Right, a lot of organizations sort of on the fence, or they hadn't adopted it, had plans to, and really the pandemic accelerated a lot of that as users started to work from home and they wanted to start to corral all of their app stack. Google natively SSO can act as that Okta provider, that one login provider, and as Pete referenced, 200 native applications out of the box that it can integrate with from a SAML perspective, so you can do things like auto provisioning, things like that.
Can you give an example of maybe an application that specifically, there's an advantage of maybe protecting the organization from bad apps?
Yeah, absolutely. And this a couple of years back, actually, this before Google even had some of these controls, and I can best be explained to something like a flashlight app, right? So before flashlight apps were sort of native to the OS, I know my Pixel devices have one built in. I think iPhones do as well, although it's been years since I used an iOS device. The flashlight apps, right? So they were prevalent all over the market, users downloading, customers downloading flashlight apps. What we found was a lot of those flashlight apps, something as simple as that, a user would install that application, skip through the warning dialogues. What those flashlight apps, a lot of them were doing were grabbing personal data. All right, so you download it with your Wursta account. In the background, and those flashlight apps were reading Drive data, and contact data, and Gmail data, etc. Absolutely no reason for a utility app like a flashlight to have any access to your personal data. So at the time we had done some work to remediate that. But what we can do now within Workspace is under your security section, if you are a Workspace customer, you have OAuth control built in. So you can audit all of the applications that your users have authorized from an OAuth perspective. You can choose to block those or whitelist those. You can whitelist or you can create a authorization for a specific scope of services, right? So from an administrator standpoint, maybe you want to allow, or you are okay with any application that needs access to my profile information, right? It just wants to read my name, who I am, etc. You can, across the board, set a policy that says any application that just needs that particular scope is authorized. Everything else is blocked. All native now within the Workspace Workspace environment.
Thanks, Patrick. I don't want to forget about this either. We've got a slide coming up, but I want to talk a little bit about identity management. It's a big deal here today. You've got the BeyondCorp logo, but this is really growing, and I think it's a big headache for a lot of organizations.
It's yeah, and I know you're going to get into this, and I threw this in here to talk about a little bit specifically on cloud identity as it relates to Google Workspace, as this is relatively a newer feature. At high level, what Google Cloud Identity is. Cloud Identity is a identity as a service, or an enterprise EMM, right? So it's a management solution for identity. It can work with your existing Workspace subscription, or it can work as a standalone product if your organization is not on Google Workspace yet.
Yeah, that's the IAP product, the identity.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and you can use Cloud Identity to manage users and apps and devices from a central location. For Workspace customers, you'd be familiar with this. That's from the admin console. For users not using Workspace, the admin console is a web-based console for you to manage all of your identities. A couple of advantages for Workspace customers, specifically those on the Enterprise Plus tier. You have access to Cloud Identity free by default as an enterprise customer. You can also add these licenses through your rep if needed. Reach out to us if you need any help with that. But what a Cloud Identity license will allow you to do is create a Workspace account. We'll call it a Workspace account for Workspace customers. But that identity account has limited features. So it doesn't have a Gmail address, or it doesn't have a Gmail service. It doesn't have calendar service. But it does allow for things like that account to read and edit Google Drive documents. It can attend Google Meet sessions. It has access to a number of Google services and allows you as the administrator to control all of the things that we talked about: MDM, ContextAware Access, DLP. All of that can be applied to these cloud identity licenses without having to provide that person with a fully licensed Google Workspace mailbox. Use cases, contractors, partners, things like that, where you want to control the identity, you want to safeguard your data by controlling the account that's accessing your data. You can do that through a cloud identity account. For non-Workspace customers, cloud identity can be used for things like managing GCP. So as your organization adopts cloud, whether that be Azure or AWS, hopefully GCP, but as your company starts to hybrid or go hybrid and maybe incorporate GCP, what we have found for non-Workspace customers is organizations were allowing their developers and engineers to sign up and sign in to these corporate-owned GCP projects with personal@gmail.com addresses. From an IT leader's perspective, it scares the death out of me that access to critical business applications and services are done through a Gmail address. So with Cloud Identity, you're able to grant your developers and engineers access to things like GCP, but manage those accounts through a console like the admin console.
Well, yeah. And what's amazing about this is it becomes really granular. If you wanted to isolate workloads in GCP, you can isolate down to the very workload and the activities that the developer needs to do. And again, we talked about context aware, stack context aware on top of that. Now you've got a developer that can only work on the things they're supposed to, and it's very secure. The APIs that Google built are so standardized and so easy to use. developers can just pull from that particular API and insert into their applications. And it makes running workloads very, very simple. And our developers, they can function much faster. They can focus on the things that are important to the business, developing for the business.
That's right.
Why don't you go to the next slide? I
think you're going to get into a little bit more about Beyond Corporate.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about compliance and security frameworks and how Google kind of leverages these things. Google didn't just come up with this idea. They actually built this on some very, very strong data, and also some intelligent people from far back. 2001, I actually got it listed here, 2001. It was actually 1994. That's a typo for me. Yeah, Zero Trust became kind of the structure around how Google conducts security today. Google developed the Beyond Corp in 2009 based upon this Zero Trust framework. And this framework is accepted today. It was made popular by John Kindervag over at Forrester. That's kind of a think tank, if any of you are familiar with Forrester. But Google thought that this was actually a really great way to move forward, and it is. It's this Zero Trust idea. If you're not familiar with what it is, it's a perimeterless security solution, meaning that as a business, you assume that everywhere that your users are and that your data is accessed from may be a hostile environment. And you need to secure all aspects of your systems. So access control, your data, how it's transmitted, secured in storage, etc. Every aspect of your environment, you should be able to access securely from any device, even if that device is not necessarily fully secured. So this Zero Trust model does that for you. And while it can seem like it's an arduous task, the rollout of the GCP services, more recently, Google Cloud was named Customer's Choice by Gartner for their unified access management. This is a big deal. And I have to say, it's because it is a very simple product to use. When you start talking to your technical folks and they understand the framework and how Beyond Corp works and the other aspects of access control and endpoint management, it's a great way to move forward. So I guess we can move on. I want to give everybody kind of an option to take a look at the Beyond Corp product. This is a short video. There's actually a series of videos about this if you wanted to get a little further in depth. But yeah, if you can kick this off.
Welcome to Beyond Corp in a Bottle, where we explore journeys into the world of context-aware access and Zero Trust networks. Most companies look at security as a binary, with the good folks on the inside and the bad folks kept outside. So security teams install various firewalls and VPN tools to create a strong perimeter, always looking for taller, thicker walls to respond to the last type of attack or compromise. But this model breaks down as soon as things get more complicated. Employees have to work outside. Contractors need access to just one or two internal systems, not all of them. Mobile devices aren't compatible with your VPN client. And attackers are sneaking into your network on previously trusted devices, hiding inside like a Trojan horse. We've seen the reinforced perimeter model break down in many ways, exposing the highly vulnerable interior. So at Google, we shifted to a model without an inside or an outside, where we evaluate the trust of each request as it is made and test to see if we should grant access. All access to company resources gets decided based on the context of the request. Who is it, and should they see this thing? What device are they on, and do I consider that safe? If the identity plus device plus access policy all check out, then they get in. If not, it's an express bus to 403 town, permission denied. In this model, there's no trust inherent to any network or location. So we don't care if you're sitting at home, at a coffee shop, or at the office. You get exactly the same level of access. And it's easy to start down this path on Google Cloud Platform with Identity Aware Proxy. All you need is an app that's using Compute Engine, App Engine, or Kubernetes, plus Google Identities for your employees. And you can start securing your apps with identity controls. To get more detail, check out my post linked below and subscribe to get more videos on BeyondCorp, Zero Trust, and Identity-Aware Proxy. When it comes to protecting your company, keep your data yours. Welcome to BeyondCorp in a Bottle, where we explore.
I love the Express Bus to 403 town. It gets me to chuckle every time I hear it.
Yeah.
Pete, back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, identity aware proxy, that's specific today to GCP, Google Cloud. It's not available in the Google Workspace environments, but it functions very much the same. And honestly, the same features you have, the context-aware access, the building out those same frameworks, they work the same in Google Email and Drive and all of the other workspace applications. In fact, just to give you kind of an idea, it's being used in YouTube as the authorization model and many other Google-based applications out there. I did want to talk a little bit around Google Cloud as well. Cloud today, there's a certain conversation around the shared support model. Shared support model generally means the client has some requirements, the Google has some requirements to fulfill. And in this particular case, disaster recovery capabilities are one of those items that come up frequently as a conversation. Tell you the truth, Google handles most of this stuff for you. You've got multi-zones, multi-regions, and you can spread applications across multiple regions very easily. Some of this is easily understood when you start getting into the nuts and bolts of this, but when you have it could be a VM or a database, or you wanted to span these things across and use other solutions, the capability is there and very simple. It's a click, and the client doesn't necessarily have to manage these things. There's infrastructure modernization. If you wanted to simply expand what you're doing, focus on the applications that your customers need. Implementation and advising on core Google Cloud networking products, and security audit. These things are all part of the offering by GCP, and also they bleed over again into Workspace. But I can say to a large degree, all of these things, they're available to every customer, but it's really tough, Patrick, if someone wanted to know, how do I get started in this? It's kind of a little scary, I guess, without knowing the interface with any application or system. We provide those types of things right off the bat. We can do an assessment of an existing environment. We also help organizations bring their environments into GCP or Workspace. And from an infrastructure assessment perspective, we can assess your network that lives in GCP. We can assess your workloads and even your VM configurations. I use this as an option to really talk a little bit about secure architecture. And secure architecture is one of those things where you want to make sure you segregate certain aspects and secure your communications between different systems. That happens here very easily just by talking to us, and we sit down and do a domain audit or a domain review. It's from my perspective, it's a great way to move forward.
Well, can you actually, if we go to the next slide, do you have any more specifics on how we get started, Pete?
I do. So like in the Workspace side of the house, we do security and cloud assessments. We also do cloud assessments of your GCP environment. We can take a look at VMs. We can take a look at every aspect of your domain structure and even how you're building applications. We can go as deep as you like, because we can do things like static code analysis, vulnerability scanning of your environments, and also other things that you might not think about in terms of security, but they're architectural pitfalls in terms of access control and how to manage the security of your environments.
And so you get through these suggestions. Like, what happens after that? Do we just say like good luck and walk away, or where do we take it from there?
Yeah, well, so it's up to you, of course. As a business, you can make any choice you want, but I use the analogy of kind of one of those food services, where you get a meal kit. We can actually provide you with the food, the recipes, the background and support, and help you kind of build out what that looks like as a meal. We can even come in and cook it for you if you like,
Yes, please.
Kind of a funny analogy, but soup to nuts, we have the capabilities at Wursta to expand or contract your organization and help you live in the cloud securely and very efficiently, frankly.
Excellent. Excellent.
Great. Thanks so much for explaining that. And then Patrick, I know we have a little bit of a different offering when it comes to Google Workspace. Do you mind speaking to that?
I just so happen to have a slide on that, Emily. So.
Perfect.
I thought you would ask. So yes, on the workspace side, of course, for customers, organizations thinking about adopting Google Workspace, at the heart of what Wursta does is our migration services. It's what we started to do all those years ago. So regardless of your existing environment, IMAP, GoDaddy, whatever, 365, Google to Google, if you need to do some sort of merger and acquisition, migration services again are at the core of what we do on the digital workplace team. Training and communication materials, so change management, training on any not only Google Workspace, but we are now in other areas such as Slack and Zoom, where we're offering training for organizations looking to adopt those technologies internally. For smaller organizations that may not have a full-time workspace administrator, but you want to take advantage of all the features that you get as part of your subscription to Workspace, we do offer a virtual admin. It's sort of like a staff aug, where for a set number of hours per month or week, those plans are tailored to what your business needs. But it's sort of a staff aug type service. Specifically on the security side, first thing that we like to do for organizations that come to us as a new customer, or organizations that have been on Workspace for a while, nobody's been administrator, they don't really know, they don't really know what state it's in, is that Google Workspace domain audit. In that sprint, we come in and we do a full what do they call it? The multi-point inspection, as they call it in the car service industry. I think we go through every setting of your Google Workspace tenant. We make recommendations on each of those settings based on industry standards. We then provide that output as a deliverable, and it really is intended for IT leaders to be a living, breathing document, right? So over the following months and years, as your Google Workspace tenant evolves, you can use that document to track changes within your workspace, et cetera. Of course, security and risk assessments in general, and that's part of the SNCRA that Pete would conduct with his team.
Yep.
And then the last one here, and this is somewhat of a, I have somewhat of a bias towards this one because I've been doing a lot of these and sort of put the model together somewhat. And this is a deep dive drive audit. This is really focused and tailored for existing Workspace customers that have been on the platform for a number of years or even recently. Google Drive, as we know, has just a plethora of capability. And if that had not been monitored or managed effectively over the years, the amount of data that is stored in Google Drive and the amount of risk that sort of presents to organization and IT leaders is scary. Google Admin Console. Sorry, Pete, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry to interject, but
no, you're fine.
When you look at organizations, and we'll call it security creep, as your settings creep and people have access to things. If you didn't set a good foundation in the beginning,
yep.
Things like Google Drive can get out of control, and things like sharing externally, those types of things become a real problem. I think we have a slide around this, Patrick. Maybe you can give a demonstration around this. And
yeah, absolutely. So we have a placeholder here. I can't really demo, but there's a use case on that. So what we do in this exercise is we come in through some custom API work and scripting that we've developed. We basically analyze every file in Google Drive. It really goes beyond what the capabilities in the admin console are, which really are limited to like 6 months, depending on what SKU you're on. So this does a full audit every file in your organization, whether they are owned by your user or stored in the shared drive. We pull in things like every permission on that file. We parse all of that data. We deliver a report that says you have X number of files. X number of those files are shared with these 17 external domains.
yeah, and
We
I
then
think,
provide options to sort of clean that all up, et cetera.
well, I don't want to kind of toot your horn a little bit, but I think one of the big ones that you found, something like 400,000 files shared externally.
And that is, yes. And that was really the basis for us putting together this service package for existing workspace customers. This sort of happened by circumstance. We had a customer asking us for some things, and I sort of developed this methodology, not knowing what we were going to find for this customer. At the end of it, at the end of my audit, we had identified 400,000 plus files that were shared publicly on the internet via the link. Customer had no idea. The owner of the files had no idea. And there was a couple of sort of, I don't want to call them bad actors, but there were a couple of users within that organization that were more guilty than others. But yes, 400,000 files that we ended up remediating. The data was available on the internet. We used that methodology and report to revoke all of that access. And then we worked to sort of backtrack and fill in the policy gaps and the settings gaps within Google Drive that sort of allowed all of this to happen. But that, that was an interesting use case for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if everyone is aware of this. You can share a file with just a link, and if you send that link to someone else, anybody with the link can access those files. So that's really what was at hand here. And unfortunately, I don't recall, and I don't think I was around at the time when this occurred, but if you think about the type of data that might have been in those drives, it could have been a major security incident, or possibly even a breach. I use breach very carefully as a term. You know, we help organizations protect from these types of things and try to set things up properly. So from soup to nuts, from initial migration into Google to even assessments down the road, we can help with all of these types of things.
Exactly right. With that said, I think Emily, if you want to jump in and sort of keep us honest. Did we get everything here?
Yes, yeah, thank you so much. Today we went over quite a bit. Within Google Workspace, we talked about controlling devices, data, and access. Within cloud security, we talked about overall best practices, where the cloud is headed beyond core. We also went over a few different security assessments that Wursta offers. I know we have about 15 minutes left here, so I did want to wrap up on the next slide and let everyone know we have a few things coming up. We have Google Next happening in October, the 12th through the 14th. So there's a link in the chat if you would like to register. Highly recommend it. They always have a lot of really great sessions. We're very excited about that here. And then we have one more webinar coming up in October that features clients talking about their experience migrating to Google Workspace. So if that's something you're interested in, or you know someone who's thinking about joining Google Workspace but isn't quite sure, it's always great to hear a secondhand account. Get to ask questions of someone who's gone through the experience themselves. We also have a security offering for all registrants, those assessments and audits that we went over. So your Wursta rep will be reaching out to schedule a quick call to go over those and to debrief today's webinar. And last but not least, we would love your feedback. If you don't mind, there's a quick link in the chat to let us know how we did today. If there's something else you would like to see, or something else you'd like us to cover within security, please let us know. I know, like I said, we've got about a little over 10 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, you can pop them in the chat or go off mute and ask away.